Zombies. A fictional undead being that has been found in all different types of fiction, media, and to an extent, folklore. The concept of a reanimated human corpse has been around since witchcraft was a widely believed practice. The concept of a reanimated human corpse that desires nothing but the flesh of mostly humans, however, that's been around since the day Night of the Living Dead was made. In today's world, zombies are literally everywhere. In films, theatre, books, TV, music, and of course, they are all the range when it comes to video games. Yes, zombies are an incredibly popular choice amongst developers looking to create worlds that have been plunged into an apocalypse. But are they used far too much? Hello everyone, I'm RedBeakRaven and welcome to a discussion video where I'll be focusing on the topic of zombies in games. I'll be pondering over the theme in games, discussing the concept at length, as well as finishing off with my final opinion on the matter of are they overused. I've been wanting to do this video for a while, and with Resident Evil 7 circling the community, I thought what better time to discuss this than now. Even though zombies aren't really in the new game, there's supposed to be zombie-like enemies in the game, so that'll do. Also, if you need a challenge, then count how many times I say the word zombie in this video. But anyways, let's get on with it, shall we? Since the day Resident Evil and House of the Dead sparked a worldwide interest in games containing undead cannibalistic beings, you haven't had to look far to find a zombie game or even a zombie within a game for that matter. They are literally everywhere in the gaming scene, even in titles that aren't dedicated to the zombie theme. While this isn't exactly news, the debates on the whole zombie craze continue. Why are people so obsessed with them? Should we try and stop before things get out of hand? Are there far too many zombies on our TVs and in the virtual worlds we play in? Well, I can't really come up with an answer for many of the zombie related questions that are constantly being asked, but I can at least try and tell you what I think, as well as talk about and answer the one question that stands out the most to me. Are zombies overused in gaming? Well, I don't really know if that is a question I want to answer before discussing the whole zombie theme in games at length. I think we should look at where it goes wrong, what is it about zombies that we found so fascinating, how much potential they have, and how they've just evolved in a way within the gaming industry. So zombies or zombie-like beings in games have a generally positive reception, whereas zombie video games themselves have a fairly mixed reception. It's often stated that a large portion of games that use the living dead as their main enemy and selling point are anywhere from bad to mediocre. Some people claim that half the reason we see a lot of rubbish ones are that zombies themselves aren't really that interesting and are overused, while others say that they are interesting and not overused, they're just used poorly too many times. I agree somewhat with the latter, to be honest with you, because while I don't find them that interesting as an enemy in a game, I do think that they can be fun to fight against and have a lot of potential. Potential that I feel is for the most part wasted. When zombies are done right, it is such an entertaining experience and can be a fairly scary one for some people, but for others 1969 was many moons ago and zombies have become less and less horrifying over the years. Unfortunately, I myself have only played a handful of games that do the whole zombie theme any justice. Zombies have sort of developed into their own little genre, and although they thrive and are better off in the horror scene, they are found and implemented fairly successfully in sci-fi, fantasy and even comedy works. Although we do have things such as sci-fi horrors, but to be honest, the amount of genres and subgenres we have in gaming now is enough to make your head swirl even thinking about how many there are. So in that case, I'll just stick with zombies and horror, because at the end of the day, they are meant to be things that intimidate and even scare us, which is one of the problems I think many of us have with zombies. Most of the time, they aren't even intimidating. You could say this is due to overconsumption. Seeing zombies as often as we do could be a contribution to them no longer having that much of an effect on us. But it's not just the living dead alone that makes a game scary. It's the atmosphere, the structure, the sound. It's being nervous when you're walking down an eerie corridor with you being the only one there, but at the back of your mind there's something else there with you. It's being in that position, then scared witless when Wake Me Up Before You Go by Wham starts blasting out from another room because a zombie or something else somehow knocked the bloody radio on. The point is, the antagonists themselves are only a wedge of the cheese that is the horror. Now there are a fair few half decent to very good zombie games that do capture them in a way that they mostly should be, but I feel it's because that there are so many that don't, and I'm not just talking about the bad ones, that there are people who just can't take zombies seriously anymore, and I can understand that completely, but allow me to just go into the psychology of it. The scary thing about a zombie is not necessarily how dangerous they are, but how horrible it would be to become one yourself, and see those around you turn into one, or the knowledge that they could become this thing that isn't entirely human. One theory out there for why we are scared of these dumb, slow moving beings is that our brains have trouble processing the image of something which is so similar to a human but obviously isn't quite human. To me that makes sense, because when you think of robots for example, and how in some stories they are like us or are trying to be exactly like us, it's actually quite uncanny. I personally do not want synthetic people to ever exist. The problem here though is that we're talking talking about the kind of horror that can only really be seen or rather felt in reality. An issue I have, and it may be a nitpick, but it's something I feel lowers that intimidation level, is that most of your protagonists and other characters in the games don't even acknowledge zombies for what they are. Zombies. Undead people, brainless without any personality or reasoning whatsoever. A thing that used to be another human being like you or me. A repulsive, decaying, cannibalistic being with no sense of self. Obviously they are the work of fiction, and that knowledge alone allows us to not feel or possibly even imagine the emotional response we'd have to seeing such a thing in front of us in reality. But we could at least make a creative guess. I don't know about you, but I would probably lose it if zombies were real and I saw one. That is just not right. I think humanity likes their dead to stay dead. Unless they come back to life as their former selves, and even then we'd be gobsmacked. If you've ever seen a dead body or two in your lifetime, then I'm sure you can agree with me, at least to an extent, on how unpleasant it can be. Just imagine them getting up in that zombie fashion. No, that's something even the hardiest of us could not go through unaffected. There's just barely any fear from the characters themselves half the time, and with an enemy such as a zombie, there's gonna be an even greater focus on the living characters, which is one reason why human antagonists are important for such a game. There's some argue that the true enemy in a zombie apocalypse isn't the zombies but humanity itself, and I would agree with that. You see things such as The Walking Dead use zombies as a sort of support to the real story, which is about this group surviving against various human antagonists. A zombie outbreak, or rather an apocalypse in general, is supposed to bring out the worst in humanity, thus making humans the true enemy. Games such as The Last of Us nail this idea on the head and show us the fear that the characters have towards the zombie-like mutants. Obviously this kind of thing depends on the game and where the story starts, but the majority of the time your character starts at the beginning of an outbreak. So they will be seeing a zombie for the first time, and usually within minutes they are killing the undead on an almost professional level, if that's even a thing. So I suppose what I'm really saying here is that most of the time, characters in zombie games aren't really that interesting. And Telltale's Walking Dead series aside, I can't think of a zombie game that had a decent story. At least a game that has the typical zombies, not zombie-like enemies. Now of course there are different types of these games, and some don't need a story, they just need gameplay. But when you're creating a single-player co-op open-world zombie game such as a Dead Island or a State of Decay type of game, you need something that's riveting outside of killing zombies. Whether it's a great world to explore, a fun and in-depth crafting system, or a base building system, anything other than just killing zombies. As fun as that can be, if that's all you want to do, then there are more than plenty of games that can provide endless zombie horde scenarios. This I feel is where some slip up with their games. I think they focus a little too much on that aspect, and half the time it adds nothing to the experience. Sometimes it even takes away from it. Dead Island is a perfect example here. I found that game enjoyable, and I could even go as far as to say it's a fairly good game. I really enjoyed exploring the environments, learning about what happened on the island, where the virus came from. I got the right level of fear at various points of the game, and I liked how it handled the RPG aspect. What I didn't like was pretty much the core component of the game, killing zombies. The combat. When Dead Island was released, it was something quite unique. A lot of people were looking forward to this game that could have been the next best thing in games with a zombie theme, but unfortunately it wasn't. It was a rough mess. Fun, but just an unpolished mess. The combat was, I'd say, 60% infuriating, with your attacks completely missing half the time, the harsh limitations of the character's stamina, and the fact that some enemies were just not worth attacking whatsoever. This wouldn't have been so bad had Dead Island gone down a more serious survival route where every zombie encounter is a tense and dangerous one. A situation where the developers didn't focus so much on sticking as many zombies in there as possible, almost as if it was trying to be like Left 4 Dead. State of Decay does this marginally well. Fighting hordes of zombies in that game is pretty difficult if you don't have a vehicle, gun or an explosive. However, that game does have its own set of problems. So essentially it could be a case of that zombie games try too hard to be like one another, or that devs seem to think that endless zombie slaughter is what overall makes a great zombie game. Well, it's like what I said before, zombies have sort of developed into their own genre, but yet are a part of so many. So it depends on what type of game they are making. Zombie survival, zombie horde survival, strategy, open world zombie RPG, or survival zombie action, multiplayer co-op. There's just a lot. There's a lot, okay? There's a lot you can do with this theme. Not only because of how easy it is to stick zombies in there, but because how easily consumed they are. It's fairly easy for devs to take advantage of zombies when you've got a large amount of people who are still crazy about them. I bet that even those who are over them still take an interest at one point in the zombie theme. Maybe even people who don't really care for them have found themselves wrapped around the concept. Oh come on, we've all asked ourselves what we'd do in a zombie apocalypse and if we could survive. As for why they are so popular, well I honestly honestly don't know if I can say what it is that makes zombies work so well. All I know is that they just do. It's something that just snaps perfectly into place for so many of us, and as we all know, when something works as well as that, there's money and success to be found with it. So you can bet big that something like that is going to be milked a lot, about as much as a dairy cow is in a month. Which leads me to say, yes, there are a lot of zombie games and zombie DLCs, and sometimes it doesn't matter whether or not they are good, because like sex, zombies sell. Didn't think I'd ever stick those two words in the same sentence. Now, I like zombies. I'm not a huge fan, but I like them as an enemy from time to time, and I do have a few ideas for my ideal zombie game, and when I think about it, Dying Light was halfway there with the whole nighttime is considerably more dangerous concept. One of the common debates out there is whether or not there are too many zombie games, and I would probably say that there aren't. There are just a lot of rubbish ones. Although I can't deny I do find myself rolling my eyes half the time when a new zombie game or DLC with zombies in it is announced, but I do still take an interest in them. Maybe it's just the post-apocalyptic setting in general I'm fascinated with, but the concept of the typical zombie is a really interesting one when you discuss it in depth. However, the zombie itself is less intriguing when used in a video game as a common enemy. This could be due to how often they are seen now in not just games but in other forms of media as well. As I said before, overconsumption. Or it could simply be a case of how they are mostly used in that zombie horde fashion. Mowing down hundreds of oncoming zombies with a machine gun or a vehicle does have the tendency to get boring very quickly, but I do like a good zombie rampage from time to time, and that's where I go and play games such as Left 4 Dead. I don't go looking for that in those open world RPG and or survival story driven zombie games, and yet I still find myself in that situation in those types of games, and while it may be fun at first, for me it does eventually go from entertaining to annoying. I'm not talking about massive groups of zombies because that's a necessity when you look at how many people could be affected. I'm talking about the waves of them in certain scenarios. I don't like that in a game such as Resident Evil or Dead Island because it just makes the zombie less intimidating. Slicing zombies up and chopping off heads here, there and everywhere like you're the Headless Horseman from Sleepy Hollow doesn't really add to the horror element that much, and again has the tendency to get boring. So they have the potential to be great enemies for certain games, even now after being in the spotlight so many times. Titles such as Dying Light, for example, have already proven that, and while it's been a long time since Resident Evil was mainly about zombies and survival horror, its older titles continue to entertain, scare and impress even today. Games like early Resident Evil installations managed to capture zombies in a way that so many haven't. The atmosphere, along with fixed camera angles making it so that most of the time you couldn't see the enemy until it was right on top of you, made the experience with the undead all the more creepy and to some terrifying. The resource management also made it more tense, as you could find yourself in a situation where all you can do is run or die, and add limited saving on top of that, well, it's no surprise the game even now is still considered nerve-wracking to play. So the undead still have the potential to be frightening in one way or another, which gives them a solid enough reason for being present in a horror game, and not just because it's easy to use them. They are a popular theme for video games, not just because of how easier and cheaper than other enemies they might be to implement, but also because I think it's difficult to replace them in certain titles. They are the perfect villain in some cases. Developers have tried to replace them with mutants and really repulsive creatures they've created, and once in a while they do that spot on. However, sometimes they are just zombies that have been renamed, which some people argue is pointless doing because at the end of the day, they are simply zombies or extremely 90-something% similar to them. However, if you look at the reasons for why the word zombie isn't ever used in the Walking Dead series, then you can see how and why developers may also choose not to stick with the usual. The zombie is also a good choice because it can be altered in many different ways and provide us with fairly unique gameplay. You see this in the form of different types of zombie-like enemies such as the infected from Left 4 Dead, who are apparently alive, or those from The Last of Us which are classed as mutated humans. Obviously, it's not just the zombies themselves that make or break a game, but the gameplay, the characters and everything else combined. So where some games get zombies right, they get the rest of it wrong. The game Zombie with an Eye is a good example of this. Although aided by the tension that builds up when fighting due to the permanent death system, the zombies in that game were very well done. The combat, characters and story, however, not so much. I'm sure a zombie wouldn't die with 1 or 2 hits of a cricket bat, but it's still a game after all, and when a single smash on the head with a shovel doesn't do much, that's kind of taking it a little too far. Then again, I suppose it could depend on whether or not you like a challenging zombie game. I know that making it easy to eliminate something can drastically lower its threat level and possibly scariness, but make it so that you are just as easy to kill can balance that out. Again, Dying Light, the very game that did that to an extent, and although that game did from time to time shove a crazy amount of zombies on your ass, you had the parkour as a way to combat that issue, if you will. I know I've probably talked about Dying Light in the zombie knight in shining armour fashion, where it's the answer to our prayers, etc, etc, etc. It is in my opinion a great zombie game, but it did have a fair share of problems that you see often in zombie games. It had a piss poor story if I'm brutally honest, the characters were okay, and I found the parkour frustrating at times. Those aside though, it is a game that's on the right track and should be one for devs to refer to for inspiration when making future zombie games. And no, that doesn't mean you have to copy the parkour element, although that was an interesting combination that worked considerably well. So all of that being said, are zombies overused in gaming? Well, now that I think about it, I'm not sure that's the right question to ask. Yes, zombies are used a lot in gaming, but is it simply a case of that zombies are not overused, they are just often used poorly? Which I actually said earlier as a counter argument against those that say they are used too much. I suppose if you play so many zombie games that are below par, you're bound to get tired of it overall and do pretty much what I do, which is grunt and sigh whenever a new one is announced, thus to some making it feel like there's just too many of the bloody things. But that's not exactly the question here. I'm talking about how many times zombies are used in games, not how many zombie titles there are. I don't think I need a long dragged out answer here, especially since I've been talking for so long, so I'll go ahead and lay down my overall opinion on the matter. And that is, no, I don't think that there are too many zombie games or that they are overused. I think the reason so many people say that is because there is and has been for a while now a lack of good to great zombie games. So they are playing or seeing so many average ones that are either like each other or are just bad, that they are tired of it and would rather the whole theme went away for a while, or possibly forever. I can't imagine the games that have zombie-like enemies in them helps the situation neither. Although they may not technically be zombies, they are still close to the actual thing. So maybe it's partially our fault for overdoing it on our journey to find that really good zombie game once in a while. It could be that because they are more popular than some, they get a lot more attention, which in turn attracts some developers to milk the whole theme. At the end of the day, I don't think there are really any right or wrong answers, because everyone will like or dislike them for their own reasons. If you think that zombies are overused in gaming, then by all means stick with that opinion, regardless of whether or not the reasons why you might think that are valid. Whether it's because you're sick of playing and seeing so many that don't do the theme any justice, or you just think that a lot of them are good but zombies themselves are used far too often for your liking, it doesn't really matter. Nobody is forcing you to play them, so if there are more zombie games coming out and people still do want them, then just state your opinion and let that be the end of it. I think that there are far too many Steam Early Access games and cheap horror films, but I'm not going to shout at people for thinking the opposite of that. I'll inform them of my side of things in hopes that they see where I'm coming from, but I won't try and change their overall opinion, at least most of the time. In a nutshell, I don't think that zombies are overused in gaming, I just think that they are often used poorly, which then forces some of us to just say no to the whole idea. Zombies are easy to set up and are easily promoted as well as consumed. A lot of us are still fascinated by these undead beings, which in turn makes it easy for developers to see the cash at the end of the decaying rainbow. However, just because they are easy to set up doesn't mean they have to be. Being creative and purposely making the task of creating a zombie game harder than it needs to be is probably the right way to go about it most of the time. Dying Light could have easily been a disappointment, but because Techland was aiming higher and even delayed the game to supposedly innovate, it became one of the best and scariest zombie games I've ever played, despite the many problems I have with it. Left 4 Dead or Nazi Zombie, hang on a minute, what are we calling it now? Call of Duty Zombies? Who cares? Those games slash modes are good examples of a zombie horde mode done right. Same goes for Killing Floor, or so I'm told. The old Resident Evils are great examples of zombie survival horror games done right. Project Zomboid is apparently a very good game of its type, and of course, despite them being mutants, The Last of Us or Telltale's Walking Dead series are perfect examples of good narrative-driven experiences in zombie or zombie-ish video games. There are a few more good ones, but I can't remember them, nor do I want to keep going with that, but the point is that there are good zombie games, and there still can be. Do I want developers to keep making them? Yes, absolutely, as long as there are more creative pursuits with zombies and not games like pissing zombies on a plane or Dead Island Riptide, which was just an enormous DLC for the first damn game. Honestly, that was taking advantage of the series and the theme's popularity. There may come a day when we are all in agreement that zombies are just overused, and whether or not a zombie game's good, the theme is just no longer a desirable motive. But that day is far from us, I think, because the concept is nowhere near fully explored. We are seeing some changes come to light with things such as Days Gone, and as much as I no longer want to see a focus on hordes of the undead, I am interested in seeing where this goes, and hopefully it turns out well. But to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of that World War Z zombie, nor do I like exclusives, but that's a different discussion altogether. Anyways, I think I'm going to stop talking about this now because I've discussed this long enough. I don't know if the time I spent rambling about this leading up to me answering the question was really necessary, but I found it fun to talk about, and hopefully it was either entertaining or informative, or both. That's always a plus. So let me know in the comments below what are your thoughts on the whole zombies in game situation. situation. Do you think that they are overused, or the games are just lacking in quality, or maybe you just can't get enough of zombies? Let me know your opinions and thoughts, and maybe you can shout out a zombie game or two you think is good. So hit the like button if you like this video. You can also follow me on Twitter or like me on Facebook. The links to those you will find at the bottom of the description. Anyways, that's all from me, so until next time, I'll see you soon.